Well, with us to discuss the budget are Danny Alexander, Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Liberal Democrat MP, and Chris Leslie, who's his Labour shadow. Can we talk about pensions first off? How many pensioners do you reckon are going to run out of money as a consequence of these changes?
I suspect not very many. I think that one of the main reasons why we can go ahead with this change now is because, as a coalition government, we've introduced the new single-tier pension. It clears away the morass of means testing that existed under Gordon Brown. It means that from 2016, every pensioner will have a basic pension from the state that keeps them out of poverty. And look, I think the people who save for retirement, people who've built up a pension pot, are responsible people who the state should trust to make the right choices for themselves.
They couldn't they? They could just blow the whole thing on a couple of holidays.
I think that's unlikely, but it is possible that someone could do that, but that would be to their own detriment. And of course, if they chose to do that, they'd potentially be taking rather a large pension pot in one go, and therefore paying more tax as well.
Presumably you... Oh, so that makes it all right, does it?
No,
but you did some research on this before you made the change.
But it's the evidence from other countries shows that people, in general terms, don't do that.
Did you research it?
Yes, of course we did. But that some people might choose to take their pension pot in one go, use it, perhaps some of it to pay off a mortgage. They might decide to draw it down in different lumps. Some people might buy a partial annuity, which may be a better choice for them. I suspect a lot of people will still buy annuities, incidentally, but it will also help to make the market more competitive. One of the concerns has been that the annuity market isn't serving people as well as it could do, or being as competitive as it could be.
Let's look at the state of the economy generally. Your very distinguished colleague Vince Cable thinks it's the wrong sort of recovery.
Well, I'm not sure that is what he thinks.
Well, he thinks it's based upon consumer spending and house price inflation.
Well, I think
is that a healthy basis for recovery?
I think it is the way that most recoveries get going. It is the right start for the recovery. Actually, a large component of this recovery isn't driven by those things. It's driven by manufacturing. It's driven by trade.
It's not driven by productivity improvement, is it?
No, it isn't yet.
Why is that?
And it's one of the things I've been saying for the last 6 months or so is that 2014 has to be the year when we see business investment really get going. It's one of the reasons why in this budget we have taken steps to increase capital allowances, support energy-intensive businesses, to encourage businesses to invest, because it's that which will help productivity to improve. And of course, it's only with a strong recovery, with rising productivity, that we can really secure better living standards for British people.
And without that improvement in productivity, we're not going to see an improvement in living standards, are we?
That's why it's so important to do the things we've done today.
But we haven't seen it so far, have we?
Well, we actually, the figures today do suggest some improvement, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, the OBR forecast today, building on the recent data of improving business investment, suggests business investment is likely to pick up. But we're not resting on our laurels waiting for the forecast to happen. We're doing things to support exporters to grow. The big changes today to the export finance regime, big changes to the tax allowances for businesses to invest in plant and machinery, extra incentives for businesses to take on apprentices to improve the skills of their own workforce, all things that help our recovery to be more sustainable.
Very well, but the Office for Budget Responsibility says that exports aren't going to increase.
Well, we're working as hard as we can to ensure that we do expand our exports. Our exports to emerging markets have risen by 23% since we came into office. Our exports to EU countries, which is the largest share of our exports, has been less because of the problems in the Eurozone. But I do think that as the Eurozone gets going, which I hope it will, I don't know that it will, that we'll see our exports to Europe expand too.
I'm going to bring you in a second, Chris Leslie, but I would just like to ask, first of all, Danny Alexander, what do you make of this fantastic Conservative poster advertising this marvellous budget achievement? What do you make of it?
I thought it was a spoof at first. It's just pretty extraordinary. It's a very...
That's your budget they're talking about.
Well, it may be our budget, but it's their words. I think it's rather patronising. I think I think it actually demeans some quite sensible things. You know, there are good reasons to be supporting bingo. There are good reasons to be encouraging our pub sector to be stronger. That's the analysis behind those measures. This is I don't know if it's a tweet to try and prove Michael Gove right in 1 second, but it's an extraordinary thing to do.
The Treasury have been tweeting this as well. I mean, they're also under the impression this is what proles do.
Well, I'm not quite sure how to respond to that, Jeremy, because the whole point of the budget is to say there are many ways in which the government can help to help people with the pressures that they're under and that we're all under. And I think the most important measure in the budget is the increase in the income tax personal allowance. That's what we have been championing as Liberal Democrats today. That's the thing that we've been celebrating. And this language, well, that's for Grant Shapps to justify.
What do you make of it?
Well, what better example of an out-of-touch government could you have than when they start patting people on the head and saying what they would like? And I think it is quite astonishing, but we kind of know, don't we, that is the sort of view that David Cameron and George Osborne have about
pay bingo more
working
cheaply
people.
and drink beer more cheaply. That's good, isn't it?
Well, I suppose, if you have 300 pints of beer, then you could get one for free on the penny off basis. But quite honestly, the thing that was wrong with this budget was what was missing, and what was missing was any action on the cost of living pressures that people are facing.
Well,
and you've been talking a little bit about pensions and savings changes.
Real growth in incomes coming up. That is going to
prices are still exceeding those, and the problem that we've got is we've had this record period.
Your cost of living argument.
For most people, life is getting a lot harder, and for such a prolonged period, a record period, 44 out of the last 45 months when David Cameron's been Prime Minister, earnings have not been able to keep pace with prices. How many times do you think in the 120 pages of the Budget Red Book cost of living was mentioned? Not once. And the reason is they just don't understand it.
Once that was productivity.
Well, and there's a real problem with the imbalance.
The
imbalance that we have in terms of their approach to the economy, because of course what's happening is that of course they've got to have action on savings. The reason we've got a savings crisis is because people are struggling to make ends meet. And once people have dipped into their savings, that's no wonder the growth projections are starting to come down in the longer term, because that has been the fueling a little bit of the recovery that we've seen. But the recovery still isn't felt by the vast majority of people. The savings ratio is coming down, and that's the OBR has confirmed that, Danny, hasn't it?
The OBR does forecast the savings ratio to fall, as you see in almost any economic recovery. But I'm very disappointed that Chris, if he is concerned about the pressures that households in this country are under, hasn't welcomed the substantial increases in the income tax personal allowance, worth now by April next year.
You give a little bit with one hand and you take so much more with the other.
This is worth £800 a year to 25 million working people paying tax at the basic rate. That is real help. And look, if you're really worried about the cost of living pressures on families, your party wouldn't have crashed the economy in the first place, helping to cause an economic crisis.
It was a banking crisis, Danny.
And who was in charge of the banks? Your boss, Ed Balls, was the city minister.
You think Gordon Brown created Lehman Brothers to go bust and all those other things? Come on, you're
he
better
was the
than
man
that.
who said there's no more boom and bust.
You're better than that, Danny.
I know that, as Jeremy says, sorry, I shouldn't be asking the question, Jeremy, you should.
You go ahead.
But Gordon Brown said there'd be no more boom and bust. It was the Labour Party that was responsible for regulating the financial system so catastrophically poorly for many years before the crisis. It was the Labour government that was running a structural deficit in our economy for many years before the crisis.
But why have we not had? Why has the deficit?
I think just a wee admission of responsibility.
Is it going to be £75 billion at the next
election?
Because we didn't get the growth. You failed to get that.
You can continue this argument in private in a minute.
There's a lot
in the pub over a penny cheaper pint of beer.
Yeah, there you are. Marvellous. Have a game of bingo while you're at it.